Hi guys, in this video I'm going to talk to you about the service in table tennis and give you just some general thoughts on the service itself. I'm also going to, on the web page, link to stuff that I've written before containing a whole heap of good tips about serving and how to serve better and more effectively. So I don't really want to rehash a lot of that. I want to just touch on a little bit of it, but just some other things as well that I want to get into. What you'll have is a combination of this video and some of the stuff I've written already, plus the notes from this video of course, and a whole heap of demonstration videos that I've done previously for about.com that are just basically a demo of each particular serve that you can have a look at and demonstrate the basic technique. So here we are today in this video. I'm just really discussing some really just the principles of good service for us as combination bat players. Just some general thoughts in that context, which generally I don't think gets talked about a lot. Now, the overall consideration, I guess, when we're talking about this service for us as combination bat players is, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve with your service? And although it's nice in theory to say, well, I'd really like to, in my service, win the point outright every time. That would be great. You know, that would be lovely if you could just serve and win the point, and serve and win the point. You know, half your job is done, then you just got to win one or two off your opponent, and that's it. In practice, it's not quite as simple as that. You know, it gets a little bit more difficult. What we're trying to do, especially as you start to move up in level, is it gets harder and harder to win points outright on the serve. And so what you start to do is you start to serve, and the goal of serving changes, I guess, from maybe at beginner level where you can serve winners and set up very easy balls for putaways. As you get better, it starts to change a little bit more, and the more advanced you get, the more it kind of starts to work towards you serve in such a way that the resulting rally develops to suit your style, okay? And that gives you then the best chance to play your patterns and therefore to win the point. So you're still serving, the idea is still okay to win the point, but it gets less likely to win the point on the serve, and instead what we're trying to do is trying to force our opponent to play into our strengths, into our patterns that we like to play, so that we increase our chances of winning the point. And although we'll never look a freebie in the mouth if our opponent can miss the ball, great. But that's really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to improve our chances of winning the point and steer the play into the areas and the styles and the type of rallies that we like. And that's what we're going to be trying to do. Now that will vary. From someone who's playing very close to the table combination bat play, if you're an aggressive player, you're probably going to be using, you may be looking to hit with the long pips and hit with the other inverted side and baffle and confuse your opponent a lot. So you're wanting probably lots of quick topspin play. You may use a few more side spins and a few more topspin serves, a few more longer serves to encourage more of a hitting game where you can get your attack going, be twiddling, occasionally chop blocking, and basically playing a very open, aggressive game. Someone close to the table who wants to play a very sneaky, push it here, push it there, block the ball over there, and control your opponent and stop him from getting a real chance to attack. So playing a tight game, you're going to serve a lot tougher and tighter than somebody who wants to hit the ball and play free and loose. So you would instead be serving a lot more double bounce serves where the ball bounces on your opponent's side once and the second bounces around the end line. Because what you want to do, and probably a lot more backspin and side spin rather than topspin and side spin, because you want your opponent to be pushing the ball back and you can then straight away get into your heavy push or chop block or roll, maybe a little one, and vary and tie your opponents in knots. Whereas myself as a defender, who sometimes plays aggressively and sometimes plays a little bit more defensively against different people, against people my level or lower, I'm quite often serving backspin, side spin, occasionally just side spin, a little bit less occasionally some top spin, because what I want my opponent to do, and mainly double bounce, I want my opponent to push the ball or maybe flick the ball, but so that it bounces once on my side of the table and comes off. So that if the ball's in my slot on either side, I will attack it, and if I'm not quite comfortable, I will push it and head back. But I'm trying to give myself the chance to get an easy attack, get my attack rolling if I can. If I'm not quite so comfortable, I'll push it and go back. But I'm trying to serve to encourage that. Against a very good player who's, sort of like maybe even a level above me and putting me under a lot of pressure, I'll try and serve just very tight to stop him attacking. Or occasionally I will serve on purpose, long, not easy for him, but definitely long, a long serve, say to his forehand, serve it long, I'll straight away go back and perhaps twiddle to the forehand pimples and hopefully channel his serve, his return into my pips for a heavy chop and then look for a counter attack. So there's all sorts of variations that can go on. And really what we're trying to do is, depending on the style of play, we're trying to serve so that it moves the game into our particular style. Okay, now that's the overriding characteristic. What I've got listed here is just a whole lot of points, I guess, when I sat down with my pen in hand and thought, well, what would I like to tell you guys, I guess, about serving, and also keeping in mind that, you're a combination bat player rather than just an ordinary normal inverted both sides. What's a little bit different for us. And here's some of the things. Okay, here's some of the things that I've noted, and some of them are applicable for combination bat players and some are just applicable in general. Okay, point one that I've got mentioned here is that deception and achieving deception about the amount of spin on your serve or the type of spin on your serve, that's more important than the amount of spin. Okay, it's more important to be able to serve and get maybe only a little bit of spin doing that, and tricking your opponent about whether it's a little bit of top spin or a little bit of top spin, side spin, backspin, side spin. That's more important than doing that and loading the ball and just getting heavy spin. So also it's easier to trick your opponent about the amount of spin than it is about the type of spin. So if you can trick your opponent and make him think you've put backspin on the ball and side spin when you've really put top spin and side spin, yes, you're probably going to get an easy return. As you play better players, that gets harder to do because they're better at reading the spin. So as you move up and get better, what becomes more important is to trick your opponent about not necessarily the type of spin, you'll probably know it, but how much you've put. So I'll be serving again like that, making that motion, and trying to trick my opponent about whether I've put side spin, light backspin and side spin, heavy backspin and side spin, or just backspin, and trying to use a similar motion. So instead of trying to so much deceive him about the type of spin, I'm trying to trick him about the amount. And that gets more important as you move up the levels, because that's a little bit harder for your opponent to read, and it remains more effective at higher levels. It's actually quite difficult at advanced level to completely trick your opponent about the type of spin, simply because if he's serving legally, you can always see contact, and then it comes down to he has to make, to be tricky, you have to make some very strange movements that he hasn't seen before, such as the old in-out, trying to snap in and out, that kind of stuff. That's hard to execute, and to contact it that way or contact it on the way out requires great wrist. And that's, you know, one of the few, I think, serves that are really quite difficult for an opponent to tell what you've put on it. Another one that's a little bit tricky like that is also some of these tomahawks, where sometimes the opponent, instead of coming here to hit the ball, sometimes actually comes all the way and hits it with the back of the racket. Again, takes great control. And what's tricky about it is that probably the first time he does it to you, you haven't seen it. And it's like, whoa. Second time, you've probably got a better idea of what he's doing. So those sort of things are kind of like, almost like trick serves, you know. The first time it's like, well, what the hell? Second time you've got an, okay, I'm watching you more closely, and you usually got a better read. Whereas just a standard serve, backspin, or on the backhand here, just varying the amount is always difficult to read, because the side spin makes it a little bit harder to read, and you can vary the amount. That leads me to my second point, where side spin is very, very useful at all levels. Doesn't matter whether you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced, side spins is really your friend, because firstly it helps to hide and disguise the amount of topspin or the amount of backspin you've put on the ball. So it's very good for that. Makes it harder to tell how much backspin or topspin's on it. So good for deception. Secondly, especially at the lower levels, it makes returning the ball a lot more difficult. So you sometimes get complete mistakes, missing the side of the table. And it certainly, even at the higher levels, what it does do is it makes hitting, not necessarily getting the ball on the table more difficult, but as you get better and at the high levels, what it does is it makes returning the ball to certain locations more difficult. And this is the typical example, the simple example, is this serve, the forehand pendulum, serving with backspin and side spin, or topspin, side spin, but basically this side spin, and when the opponent hits the ball hits his bat and wants to kick this direction. So I serve, he hits it, and it kicks. What that does is it makes it more difficult for him to get the ball down the line. Makes it harder for him because he's fighting against the side spin. And that's where a lot of servers will serve and step. And what they're doing is they're running around the backhand because they're hoping that side spin they've put on the ball will force the opponent to come this way. And they can then open up around this corner, which is why a return down the line is often so effective. But that's intelligent use of side spin. It's forcing the opponent via the side spin, you're channeling his returns. Another example that you don't see quite so much these days, but Zoran Primorac used to use it a lot, Jorgen Persson uses it a bit, which is the backhand serve from the middle, serving that way with side spin, and hits their bat, channels it this way and into your forehand. So you can serve, recover, and you're kind of forcing him to come this way for the big forehand. And this is good, especially for people like Jorgen Persson or Zoran Primorac. This is a good weapon also for those of you who have quite a good backhand, because you can serve it and stand still, and you don't actually have to commit to running all the way over to your forehand. You can stay in the middle, and if the ball does come to your backhand, you can still hit a backhand, but you're expecting it on the forehand side. Someone like Kong Lingwei, he used side spin occasionally using a reverse tomahawk there. And what he wanted was the ball to come to his backhand because he had such a nice backhand. So he would serve, sort of wait a little bit on his backhand, the ball would tend to come here, and again, away he goes, he opens up with the big backhand. So they're using side spin there to channel, control your opponent's direction of his return a little bit. Another good point that doesn't usually get mentioned a lot for combination bat players is if you serve with side spin, you can make your third ball jump sideways off the table and wobble quite a bit. And what I mean by that is that usually if you serve with a good side spin, backspin ball, topspin, side spin will work too, but basically a good heavy amount of side spin, get your opponent to return it, So it doesn't matter which serve you use, as long as there's good side spin on the ball. Get your opponent to return it and just roll the ball with the anti-spin of the long pips. Don't hit it too hard, just a gentle roll. You don't want to have too much pace on it. And what that will do is the ball will go over. Quite often it will wobble a little bit. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But what it will then do is when it hits this side of the table, it will jump and it will kick. And it's quite disconcerting from the opponent because what's happening is you're serving the side spin, he controls the ball, you just do a plain old roll, and there's no side spin in this third ball, it's just a simple roll, and so it looks like you'd think the ball will go forward, but it doesn't. The spin from the serve is still enough on the ball that when it bounces on his side of the table, it goes and kicks. Okay, try it. Just don't hit too hard with the pips or the anti-spin. Just gently brush it and roll it. And I can do that and get a nice 45-degree kick quite often with that. And it's something, again, it's unique to us as combination back players that, again, doesn't get mentioned because most serving things, serving guides are written for double inverted players. So give it a try. Works well. Okay. Ideal serves, I've got noted here, the ideal is the double bounce serve. Okay, at lower levels, yeah, you can get away with longer serves, especially if you've got good spin on the ball or maybe decent deception, you can get away with it. At higher levels, your opponent is going to start if the ball is long and he's balanced and reading you well. If the ball is long, he can usually loop with enough topspin to really kind of defeat your spin to a certain degree and give him safety and also give himself the attack. So as you move from beginner up to advanced, long serves have to become more of a surprise weapon. They have to be well placed into awkward locations such as wide, where he can't reach it or he has to move, or into his elbow or across his playing elbow. Because if you just serve a long serve straight to your opponent's forehand or backhand power zone, even if you get good spin, a good advanced top spinner will just heavy spin it and straight away he's into a big attack and you're on the defensive. Which quite often when you're serving that long serve, you're wanting to be aggressive, not defensive. And you don't want this attack coming back at you. You want a weak return. So as you move up to the advanced levels, if you serve that long serve, look for the attack, but be prepared in case he does spin, because you may actually find a loop coming back. So as you move up, double bouncing the ball on the serve so that it bounces once, with the second bounce in that last 6 inches of the table or so, or maybe just barely off the end of the table. That becomes more and more important. Again, for reasons that I've written in exhaustive detail on my webpage, but basically it gives you the best a chance to get your attack going and control the point. It makes your opponent, takes away his big power attack, forces him to push or flick the ball, but from as far away from you as possible, gives you more time. It makes it more difficult for him to drop the ball short because it's so far away from the net. Makes it easier for you then to get your attack if you're trying to attack. And it cuts away his angles and takes away wide angles as well. So it does a lot of things, that double bounce serve, if you do it properly. Now hand in hand with that is that you have to be at the level where if you get that double bounce serve, and especially if you're using mainly backspin, side spin, because the backspin serves are the easiest to double bounce, you have to be in a position where if your opponent, as most opponents in that intermediate to advanced level will do, if he pushes back, you have to be able to open off a backspin ball. Okay? If you can't open off a backspin ball, well then okay, you're going to just have to push it back and you're not going to get your attacking. And if you're a defensive player or a control player, that may be fine, you may not care. But if you're an aggressive player or looking to be an aggressive combination back player, it certainly does pay to be able to spin that first attack up off backspin, get him to block, then get into it. And I mentioned that in the other video, I'm not going to go through that again. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, your serve should really allow you to start into the rally with your best sequences and your best patterns. It's no good serving a really wonderful serve that your opponent always puts back in such a way that you actually don't like the return. You can't play your ball that you want to play. So if you're, say, you've got a weak backhand off backspin, you don't want to serve too many forehand pendulums and then have to try and lift the backspin from here. It's okay if you're going to run around and hit it, great. But if you're hitting age 50 and you're not very fast on your feet, you're not likely to be running around hitting a lot of forehands from the backhand corner. So in that case, if you've got a very weak backhand hit, or even a weak backhand push against backspin, serving the standard forehand pendulum backhand side spin serve is crazy, because all it will do is it will tend to make your opponent push the ball back to your backhand with backspin, and you're straight away playing against the kind of shot you don't want. So your choices are either improve the backhand or maybe serve a lot more simple forehand serves to get him to go cross court, serve it to his forehand, maybe serve a reverse serve and get the ball to kick the other way and serve it that way. Or more simply, for those of us who haven't got 3 or 4 weeks to try and master that reverse pendulum, stand in the middle and serve a backhand serve with side spin that will automatically go out this way anyway. I mean, it's that simple. You just got to look and say, well, look, forehand pendulums make the ball go that way. Reverse pendulums or this sort of backspin tend to make the ball go that way. You serve backspin and double bounce it, you'll probably get a lot of backspin back. You serve a lot of topspin, you'll probably get a lot of topspin back. What are you looking for? What suits you? Serve more of that. And just try and avoid letting your opponent blast attacks at you. So not too many long ones that he can attack easily. Long ones that he can attack with difficulty and he has to move and spin the ball, that's not so bad, because if the ball's not coming so fast, but it's coming spinny, well, you've got more time to turn to the ante, twiddle, and start loading up some backspin, making life difficult for your opponent. So, again, there's good things and bad things. Okay, yep. Take notice, pay attention to any serves that your opponent seems to be struggling with. Okay, this is part of this idea of getting the focus away just from you and starting to pay attention and focusing a bit more on your opponent. Take notice. If you serve a little short serve down his forehand and he's way back and he doesn't get in time, he struggles to make it in, take note of that. Serve a few more balls, try it again. If he struggles a second time, you've probably found a weakness. If the next time he gets it fairly easily, well, he's probably adapted to it. And it's not really a weakness, he may have just been not paying attention. But it goes back to our talk on weaknesses before. You have to pay attention to that sort of stuff. Then the next decision is, if you think you've found a weakness, you have to decide whether you're going to hit that weakness a lot or whether you're going to save it for when it's maybe 9-all in the 5th and you go to it then. And people argue that all day. I would probably say it's better to maybe try and keep going to it every so often, because you don't want to really go to it at 9-all, in the 5th or in the 7th, and suddenly, realise, hey, it wasn't a weakness, he was just sleeping, and you may have left it too late, you may fluke it back or anything. So I would say, if you find a weakness, don't hit it every time, but hit it often enough to win your share of points with it. Make the most of it on there and then. Don't save it up, because you may, it's better to be 5 points up in the final game because you were using the weakness than it is to be 9-all and then going to a weakness. If you find a weakness, use it there and then, and maybe your opponent will fix it next time, but you'll worry about it then. Anyway, yep, crossing the elbow, okay. Whenever you're serving, going across your opponent's playing elbow is always a good idea. And we've mentioned that in the playing elbow videos of what your opponent's playing elbow is. And the reason being is that every time you manage to get a ball to curl across his elbow, he has more decisions to make. the more decisions he has to make, the more likely he is to make a mistake, make the wrong decision, or just hesitate, not do it in time. The better off for you. So crossing the elbow is good. Can be a little bit risky if you miss, if you don't cross the elbow, or you cross the elbow and end up in his power zone and he's waiting on it. So, it's a risk you take, but it can be quite effective and certainly worth a try. So don't be afraid to try and cross the elbow. If you're crossing across his playing elbow, but you're still double bouncing the ball, and it's not long, then you really can't lose. He's not going to be able to attack you. The risky one is the long serve across his elbow that just might cross it and end up in his power zone where he's going to hit it. Okay. Serving too short is also no good. So although I'm saying serve 2 bounces, that's the best, doesn't mean 3 bounces is even better. If you serve too short, you give your opponent the opportunity, it makes it easier for him to put the ball back short and stop you attacking. It also opens up angles for him, which means that he can take you wider. You don't want that. So 2 bounces, not 3. Okay. The only time I would try and do a really 3 bounce is if my opponent was way, way back and I thought I could catch him napping. Better to have, I mentioned this in the other video, better to have 2 really, really good serves than 10 mediocre ones. Okay? So try and work on, get a serve that you can basically, doesn't matter backhand or forehand, a serve that you can serve backspin, side spin, top spin, side spin, medium backspin, side spin, a little bit of top spin, side spin, all that range from basically heavy backspin and a little bit of side spin through to side spin, through to heavy top spin and a little bit of side spin. And mixing between how much side spin you put on the ball. If you've got that variation and you can adjust from heavy, a little bit lighter, float, basically side spin, through to the top spins, you're going to give your opponent a lot of trouble just from reading the spin. If you can do that and still double bounce the ball, he's going to find it very difficult. Even at the advanced level, he may not win the point outright, but he's going to have a lot of trouble getting in and attacking you. And it gives you the chance to control the point, and that's what you're after. A little trick that I just thought I'd mention that I noted down here is that this I first noted because one of my students was doing it by accident when he was trying to spin the ball. And what it is when you're serving and you're wanting to spin it, serve the ball so the ball goes, if I'm looking from a side point of view, you want to serve the ball so when you hit the ball doesn't go down into the table, the ball goes out and falls on the table. If you do that, you'll get better spin, you'll get more kick and more bite on the table. Now, that's how to get the best spin, by serving so that the ball comes off the racket, goes more or less horizontally, falls onto the table. But if you want to trick your opponent a bit, if you actually deliberately serve so that it goes into the table, what you tend to do is you tend to kill the spin. And that can be quite nifty if you do it on purpose. Because your opponent, if you do a few normal ones where it falls onto the table and it spins, and then you do one where you hit it into the table a little bit more, what you'll find is the spin will die, and your opponent, especially if you're serving a backspin ball, say, your opponent will play for the backspin, it won't be there, he'll pop it more, and you're ready to attack. And it's a nifty little trick that you can use to kill the spin and add more deception. So just by hitting it into the table a little bit more. Now, be aware that makes the ball bounce a bit more, so you have to adjust for that so that you don't end up popping, an easy high one. Now that leads me to another one that I just thought of now, is that occasionally it's good to actually use that high bounce to stuff up your opponent because it's unfamiliar. Now, especially at the intermediate advanced level, everybody gets used to people serving a certain way. It's like the rules, the rules of the game, the conventions. Everybody serves so the ball goes 2 or 3 centimetres above the net, or an inch or 2 above the net, and the ball bounces low and it finishes on the table. And everyone gets used to that. Now occasionally if you actually on purpose serve very heavy and ram the ball in and bounce the ball sort of that high above the net, so that it comes up high and lands deep on your opponent's table. What you'll often get from your opponent is this sort of, whoa! And he'll be coming in for the short serve, but the ball's up here, and you can whack the next one. I use that now and again. It's quite a good little trick. You've got to be brave, because if he's waiting on it, you're serving him a ball that's going to bounce up here, and he can really pound it. But if you can trick him with it and not give it away with your setup, what you can do is basically serve a couple of those, and then serve one, ram it into the table near your end line, and it doesn't really matter whether you spin it or not. Sometimes I spin it really heavy and sometimes I float it. But the idea is to bounce it really high above the net and bounce it deep on his side of the table. And you're giving him something that he doesn't see much of, a high serve, coming deep. Whereas everyone's used to the low serves that normal play gets served in. That can be quite tricky. And quite often the more advanced your opponent, the better it works, because he's used to seeing certain types of serves in certain ways, and very few advanced players ever serve something like that. It's just not done. So it can be tricky, it can work. I use it myself to good effect every now and again. I don't know if I'd be game to use it against the Australian champion, but I have used it at nationals against top 10 Australian players and had it work. So, and to be honest, sometimes, occasionally, it hasn't. So, well, I think I'm in the lead on that one overall. All right. Another just mention is experiment a little bit now and again. Okay. It leads into that one. I found that one out by accident, that serve. It was kind of like just a nice accident. That I did it by accident one day, surprised my opponent, and I tried it again on purpose, and away it went. So don't be afraid to just stand up at a table, fool around a little bit. Try different things, just see what happens. And you may find that you have a knack for a particular serve that no one else does, and people don't see much of. And then if you do, work on it a bit, brush it up, make it better. A lot of good serves just by fooling around and forgetting about what's logical, what you think should or shouldn't be, just serving and just flipping that wrist around and seeing what comes off, and then thinking, oh, that worked well, try it again. That's how you make a serve of your own, how you invent something unique for yourself. And yeah, okay, maybe you won't come up with anything great, in which case you've all still got conventional serves. But a little bit of experimentation won't hurt you. Trust me on that one. Okay, grip. Just want to mention a little bit of grip. We're not too bad as combination bat players. Now, if you're a penhole player, serving, you naturally should be fairly loose anyway. You're not going to have a lot of problems being flexible and moving the bat around. As a shakehand player, the question is, okay, should we drop these last three fingers off the bat, or should we hang on to it? If you drop the last three fingers, you'll get more flex. You'll definitely be able to move it better and get more angles and more snap. I sometimes use the middle finger to basically add to my snap by flicking it into my bat handle as I serve. And sometimes I don't. It's just one of the little tricks I sometimes do. You don't have to though. I mean, you can hold it and keep the fingers on the bat if you're comfortable with that. As someone who twiddles, if you are twiddling with the shakehand grip, it shouldn't be a big deal to you to drop the fingers off, serve, and firm up your grip. Because if you can face it, let's face it, if you can twiddle and get your grip back, dropping the fingers off and putting the fingers back shouldn't be all that hard. So, personal taste, but yeah, I think you get more benefits from dropping the fingers off. Backhand serves, yes, okay. Backhand serves can be very effective, okay. There's usually the big focus is on when people are coached. Beginners, okay, learn a few basic serves, and then quite often the next serve that they're taught is forehand pendulum. And why are they taught that? Because professionals use it a lot, advanced players use it a lot, and so a lot of coaches just will go, well, that is the first advanced serve you will learn. Now, the thing is, as we know by now, that forehand pendulum serve is used for a reason. It's used to channel the ball and encourage the ball to come to your backhand side, so that as a player you can run around and hit forehands, or perhaps hit a backhand. Now, for us as combination bat players, and for most of us who are using pips or anti-spin on the backhand side, is that what we want? Well, yeah, sometimes yes, but sometimes no. You know, sometimes you do want it. Sometimes you'll say, okay, I want to serve that because I want him to come here so I can do something tricky with my long pips or anti-spin. Or if you're like me and actually open up quite well with your backhand attack with the inverted, I will often use this serve, twiddle and hope for the ball to come here so I can hit a third ball backhand. So there are times, yes. But if you are someone as a combination bat player out there, if you're somebody who you're steady on the backhand but you really don't have much offence with it, and you don't hit very much off the inverted, you don't twiddle and hit very much with it, and on the backhand pips you don't do anything really weird and wonderful, you're just steady, it's not really a great serve for you. It doesn't help you in any way. You'd probably be better off using a backhand serve, using the backhand more to get the ball over here more often, or just a plain old forehand serve from this side, even a tomahawk, or just a kind of, William Hensel does it in Australia. It's not quite a tomahawk like this, it's more of just a little kind of tomahawk where he's not coming down on one knee, he's actually just staying balanced. Puts it to his opponent's forehand, encourages the ball to kick out to his forehand and he can attack. And you're probably better off doing that. So backhand serves can be very valuable because if you're somebody who doesn't do much on that backhand side and you're really wanting to play the backhand, I guess, off someone's attack, or you'd rather be, I guess, really, you know, you're looking to attack first, but you're looking to attack with your forehand, and you're not that fast, you know, then it's silly. You know, forehand, standing here, if you're 50 and 50 pounds overweight, serving there a forehand pendulum, trying to run around to hit a forehand, maybe getting it, but you'll never get back. I mean, that's just like pointless. Stand in the middle of the table, serve a backhand serve, get it here, hit the ball. And if it comes here, push it with your backhand, and you're still in the middle of the table. You haven't given up any side coverage, you know. And so a backhand serve can be much better for you. You know, you've got to use what serves that suit you and your style. Yeah, mentioning that as well, a forehand serve from the middle. So instead of this forehand pendulum from here, you can stand in the middle of the table and serve a forehand pendulum. And now your opponent will tend to hit there. And if you do have a good backhand, or a good pip backhand of some sort, that now makes sense. So you can stand in the middle, serve it to there, maybe to the opponent's backhand, get the ball back here, play your backhand attack with the inverted, or push or roll it with your pips. And again, you haven't given up any table. You're still nicely balanced in the middle of the table because you're serving from the forehand middle. Nothing wrong with that at all. Okay? Is it suitable for a 20-year-old double inverted player with a good forehand? Would he serve a lot from there? Probably not, because he wants to dash over this side and hit his forehand. But for a 45-year-old who can't move that fast and doesn't want to do that, it's a sensible serve. So, you know, a lot of coaching revolves around that, you know, professional, semi-professional, the 18 to 25 bracket who are big attackers with double inverted. And it just does not apply to us as combination bat players and to those who are a bit older and not moving as fast. It's crazy to try and play like them, you know. So if you serve like them, you're going to force the ball into patterns that suit them and not you. And that just doesn't work. Okay. Yep. Now, I did mention that double bounce serves are good, but don't serve double bounce serves all the time. If you serve them all the time, your opponent will be expecting it and he'll get himself closer and get in position. and he'll take the ball much more easily. You have to break it up occasionally with a longer serve so that if he starts to creep in, you serve a fast long serve somewhere where he's not expecting it, and you'll force him to go back again. If you just serve double bounce serves all the time, he'll start to come in and handle it. You have to use some variety. I don't think there's any serve or any stroke that's so good that you can use it every time, because it's the variety in keeping your opponent guessing that allows you to basically win and maximise your chances. Okay, you need some variety. Yep, only a few to go, so bear with me. Yep, another one that's quite often not really mentioned is that in terms of how high above the table you hit it. Now when we're talking about our standard serves where we want the ball bouncing quite low above the net, if you're actually making contact this high above the net, forget about it. You're never going to get the ball to bounce low over the net. And you're also probably going to struggle to get the ball to ever double bounce. You'll go off the end of the table a lot. So we're looking at basically, the rule of thumb is usually somewhere around net height, maybe a tiny bit higher, hitting the ball out, letting it drop on the table. Because if you do that, if you hit the ball out, let it drop on the table, and you hit it just above net height, it's going to bounce around net height, it's going to work. Okay? If you hit the ball up here and drop it onto the table, it's going to bounce well above net height. And if you hit the ball into the table and bang it down into the table, it's not really going to matter at what height you hit it, it's probably going to go high and over. But by hitting the ball at around a little bit higher than net height, hitting it out, letting it drop, that way you'll get good spin and you'll also get the ball about the right height over the table. So get a friend. I mean, it's very hard for you to tell yourself from this angle. Either get a friend to look at it from the side view or get a video camera. Put the video camera level with the table, put something on the slide that shows you your 6-inch mark, or even just put it at the net height, which is net height, and see whether you can see the ball above the net, below the net, or 10 inches above the net. That will tell you straight away, is your contact too high, too low, or not bad. It'll probably also give you a good idea, if you do it from the side, it'll give you a very good idea of whether you're hitting the ball into the table, or whether you really are hitting it out and letting it fall. So a camera can be very good. Or a trusted friend who knows what he's doing. Okay, contact with the ball. This is a feel kind of thing. When I'm trying to spin the ball, I'm trying to get thin contact. I'm trying to take a very brushy, skimming it contact so to maximise my spin. If I hit it too solid, I will get a lot less spin and possibly hit it more into the table. Now that can be used by you on purpose to cut down the amount of spin if you wish. So if you're normally serving with a good amount of spin, if you then on purpose hit one more with the bat and less skim, you will serve a lot less spin. And if your opponent's been waiting for spin and you suddenly hit it a little bit more, you may very well trick him because the spin's a lot less. That can be very handy if you do it on purpose. One of the things with beginners is quite often beginners, their control of the ball is so erratic, they naturally get a lot of spin variation because one time they skim it, one time they hit it, one time it's somewhere in the middle, the next time it's something else, and they actually get variation just from the fact that they can't hit the ball the same way twice anyway. It's as you get more advanced and start to get better and get better control, you can actually find that you get the problem that you're too predictable. And that every serve you serve the same way, you make the same contact, you get the same spin, and your opponent starts to latch onto that and get used to it. So as you get better and your ball control improves, you sometimes actually have to make the effort to be more unpredictable. So strange but true. So be aware of that. Wrist, yes, okay. Wrist in serving, loose and flexible. Don't tighten, okay? We know our wrist is important in any stroke, but especially on that serve and return of serve, we want to be loose and in control, flexible to go any way. If we tighten, if we stress up, you're going to find it very hard to get delicate motor control. Serving and return of serve is the equivalent. I might be overstating a little bit, but it's like if you were doing, say, someone doing brain surgery on you, would you want somebody going in like this, holding on that scalpel as hard as he could? Or are you hoping that he's going to be lightly holding it with precision control? If you're an artist painting, do you paint gently under control, or do you mash it? No, you don't. So same with serve and return. Firm enough that you don't lose grip, but no firmer. Don't mash the handle, don't stress yourself out. You'll lose all your fine touch, your fine motor skills. Okay? Because all the big muscles will take over, you'll stress everything, and you won't have any serving touch worth a damn. Okay. Probably again, the last thing here that I've got noted down is in terms of practice. What should you practice when serving? Now, I've talked about how often to practice. I'm not going to go over that again. I'm just thinking more in terms of what should you learn first. And what I would suggest is basically, if you are very comfortable, if you are good at hitting the first attack against backspin, then whenever you learn a new serve variation, I would suggest learn the backspin version first. Then add side spin to it, get backspin and side spin, then go to side spin, then go to side spin and top spin. Okay? Because the backspin ones are going to be the easiest to double bounce and be the most control. And it's assuming, of course, then your opponent will most often push the ball back to you long, and you can open easily off that backspin ball, get his block or whatever, and get into it. If, however, you struggle against hitting against a backspin ball, if you're better against topspin, flip it. Learn the topspin version first of whatever serve you're doing, add more side spin, and then the backspin version you should have as variation, but be aware that when you serve backspin, you're tending to get a push return, and you may not be able to attack that. You may have to push it back and give away the initiative. What's the solution to that? Well, the solution is either serve less backspin serves, in which case you get less variation, which is not a great option. Or the solution is get with a friend, spend half an hour each week having the opponent, your friend, push the ball to you. So serve a backspin serve, get him to push the ball, practice opening, get him to block it, practice hitting the next one off topspin. So it's basically serve backspin, he pushes, you open, he blocks, you hit forward off your normal stroke. Do that for half an hour, every week. It won't be a weakness very long. And then at that point you can now use backspin, side spin, mainly side spin, topspin. You can use any variation. But that hold, that inability to open up against a backspin ball, especially for us combination back players, that's a hold that we should not have. Okay, it doesn't take a lot to fix it, just takes maybe half an hour once a week. If you can't get to training, if all you play is games at the club, or competition at the club, then the next thing I would say is, well, suck it up and start serving backspin in matches, get your opponents to push it at you, and start practicing opening and then hitting the next one normally. Yep, you'll lose, guaranteed, because you'll make a lot of mistakes. So for 6 months you'll lose, because if you're only playing competition once a week, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to get used to it. After that though, you'll be fine and you'll start to win and you'll beat better players, because you'll have plugged that hole, that very important hole, which we need as combination bat players. We need the ability to start an attack against a push ball, because hopefully we can get our opponent to push a lot of balls at us that we can open up and attack whenever we want. So hopefully that's how we start a lot of our attacking sequences, because it's riskier trying to start an attack off topspin, because serving topspin balls or getting into a topspin rally to try and hit your first one, you're taking a big chance that the opponent is going to get in first and you're going to be blocking or be on the defensive when you're trying to be aggressive. Now that's okay if you're a defensive player or a control player who just wants to push and block, but if you want to be able to attack occasionally, it's not a great thing. So you've got to plug that hole. Okay, so those are just some general points in terms of serving with combination about players. If I think of anything else, I'll add stuff, I'll add more videos and basically do stuff. As I said, there's some other stuff I'm going to link to that I've already written that's going to be useful. There'll be the demo videos of the basic serves themselves to have a look at. Practice a few serves, but really the idea behind this serving thing is we're using this serve, especially as we go from beginner to intermediate to advanced. As you move up the ranks, it becomes less of a point-winning weapon on the serve, and it becomes more of a way to move the game in the direction and into the style of play that you want to focus on, that you want to play. If you're good enough to have serves such as Waldner, to have serves that just basically can win you points, wonderful. That's an added bonus. That's great. But even at pro level, you can see at pro level, there aren't a lot of Waldners who can serve and serve somebody off the table. Not too many. Maybe Marlene. Can't think of anybody else who's got really feared serves at the moment. Everybody else uses fairly good serves, but they're not quite just a point-winning weapon. But say Waldner when he had the hidden serves, or the Chinese pen holder Leo Guolang, the 99 world champion, who just had, with the short pips and the inverted reverse penhold backhand, devastating serves. They come along rarely. Now, if you're one of those people, that's just great. If not, if you're like the rest of us, keep working on them, but basically try and get serves that complement your game rather than having a good serve that doesn't work with the rest of your game. That doesn't help. So anyway, if you can take that away from it, that's probably just as an overview level of serving, probably the most important idea to have in. Use serves that work for you and your game style and push the play in the direction that you want. Okay, my voice is again starting to go, so I'm going to cut it short there. I think that's probably enough anyway for you. So until probably tomorrow or the next day, where I'll be working on some other player analysis and stuff like that, I'll see you then.